Could this mark a turning point for tech titans who reap huge profits for the anything goes content served up on their platforms? Free speech absolutists, including Elon Musk, up in arms over the weekend arrest in Paris of the 39-year-old founder of Telegram. How strong a case against the Russian-born Pavel Durov and his encrypted social medium, Telegram, that's popular among dissidents and pro-Putin milibloggers alike? Durov's detention comes as online hate speech and disinformation continues to spiral, as evidenced with the false narratives spun on social media during the UK's recent far-right riots. Are the Durovs, Musks, and Zuckerbergs of this world innocent facilitators enabling free expression, or publishers profiting from hate and crime? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking, should tech titans beware? Joining us, cybersecurity and digital diplomacy consultant Reina Stamboliska. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
From Avignon in southern France, attorney Etienne Drouard. Glad to see you're extending your summer there, but thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
From Hartlepool in northeast England, tech journalist Connor Jewis. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
France 24's Peter O'Brien is the host of our Tech 24 show. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Francois.
You've just been going over the rap sheet. We don't even know if it's the rap sheet yet, but a statement's been put out in the last hour. And what is it? Numbers is what, 12, something like that?
Yeah, we've got a list of charges from the Paris prosecutors just in the last couple of hours, and they are extensive. Pavel Durov looks like he's in big trouble. As we know, he was arrested on Saturday evening at Le Bourget airport, and only now have we heard from prosecutors what the charges are, aside from reports in the French media with police sources and such. So this is the first official communication we've had. I can run through a few of the most serious ones. Complicity in webmastering of an online platform in order to enable an illegal transaction in an organised group. That's basically complicity in organised crime. Most of them are to do with that. Complicity in possessing pornographic images of minors. That's
and these again are the charges he potentially faces. He has not been formally charged.
Yeah,
yet,
that's right. So these are against a person unnamed. But as far as we know, this is the only arrest that's been made has been him. This is the way it sometimes works. So there seems to be a few charges about child sexual abuse material on Telegram, which is hosted on the platform without proper oversight, according to prosecutors. Then there's the organised crime section of it, things like the selling of narcotics or the selling of tools used to hack into internet systems. And then there's a tranche of charges around the provision of cryptographic, so encryption tools, without properly declaring them to French authorities. So that sounds like a bit of a nerdy one, but that's interesting because I've not seen that before. But certainly there are a lot of very serious alleged crimes.
And as we know, the devil's often in the detail. Again, we're still waiting on the specific charges. That's not stopping the rest of the planet from opining. Delana D'Souza has more.
Located on the outskirts of Paris, this is the building where Pavel Durov is being questioned. The 39-year-old founder of Telegram saw his detention extended late Sunday by the investigating magistrate in the case. French media reported the Franco-Russian billionaire was the subject of an arrest warrant issued by France. Authorities in Moscow, meanwhile, say they're waiting for more details.
We don't know exactly what Durov is accused of. We haven't heard any official statements. Before saying something, we should wait for clarifying the situation for charges against him.
Dubai-based Telegram boasts nearly 1 billion users, but the messaging app has been criticized for its failure to moderate extreme content. While the company says it's got nothing to hide, Russian lawmakers claim Pavel Durov is being made a pawn.
They have hostage, and they will try to blackmail Russia. They will try to blackmail all the users of Telegram, that now they're not going to just gain control, but they will probably try to block the network here in Russia.
Moscow has leapt to Pavel Durov's defense, even though he left the country in 2014 after coming under pressure from local authorities. While Durov remains a Russian citizen, he acquired French nationality in 2021. His initial period of questioning can last up to 96 hours, after which Pavel Durov can be released or kept in custody and charged.
96 hours until at least Wednesday morning. Reina Stambolisia, your reaction to that report?
Well, there are so many things. One of them is, how do we define Telegram? Meaning, what is the legal framework that it should abide by, right? And this one is kind of a technical discussion, but it comes from the question, like, if there are so many problems on the platform, why haven't EU or American justice systems reacted before?
Let me ask Etienne Drouard about that specific point. Etienne, I was reading this morning that actually Telegram does not fall under the remit of the Digital Services Act, because even though there's 1 billion users, there's only less than 45 million active users. Is that correct?
Yes, you have 2 layers of jurisdiction in Europe. Over these limits, it is a pure European competency. Under this limit, or for criminal offenses, it relies on member states' jurisdictions. And here, we are not in a case of content regulation, but criminal prosecution. It's not a general regulatory case, but a criminal one, and not launched by European institutions, but by a French public prosecutor in charge of a criminal proceeding. It doesn't matter, it doesn't deal with national security issues, as it could from a US perspective, or a Chinese perspective, or a Russian perspective. Under French law, this procedure is a criminal procedure led by a magistrate in charge of prosecuting crime, because a service provider does not collaborate with justice investigations to provide the identity of criminals over its platform.
And so you heard Peter O'Brien at the outset, Etienne, describing that long rap sheet, the potential rap sheet. Is it justified, this arrest of Pavel Durov?
So the French law is organized exactly as some other laws under democracies. When illegal content is at stake, you first ask the publisher of this content to withdraw the content. If the publisher is not known, you ask the service provider hosting this content to withdraw any consent. And if this illegal content is still online because the service provider does not answer your requests, you would consider that the service provider is an accomplice to the criminals, and therefore, because after several requests, no valid answer was provided about the identity of criminals, the service provider can be prosecuted for the same level of seriousness as the criminals themselves. It happened to platforms before, under US laws, under French laws, under any democracy's laws, when service providers, as their role in intermediating communications between people were not collaborative with the institutions, they could be prosecuted. This is the case of Mr. Durov. He was not afraid of it because he came in France for a night and he did not anticipate that he would be arrested. It could have happened in any other country where you don't collaborate with justice.
Reina Stambolisia, do the French have it in for Pavel Durov? The president's putting out a tweet earlier saying, look, this is a matter for the judiciary. I have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, so that was, first off, what legal framework we are talking about. So you have what Etienne just described. We can go further and discuss more about more overarching and longer term things like the
Has
DSA.
Telegram been uncooperative?
But so from what the authorities are saying, it has been. And we've seen previous news reports, back in the time, where Telegram does not respond with information when asked to do so in the case of, other judicial investigations. But then what Macron has been referring to earlier, what you mentioned, is the sort of outcry that this arrest is political, right? And honestly, I'm not sure it is to start with. However, it will be, because when you are the CEO of a social media platform, let's say it that way, when you are the CEO of Telegram, which boasts nearly 1 billion users and which is used in the war, in the Russian war in Ukraine by both sides, you are not just the CEO of, some online messaging platform. You hold a huge amount of power in the informational ecosystem. You as a person not bowing to demands from from nation states or from EU member states and so on and so forth. So even if in the beginning, this was just quote unquote, right, like a criminal prosecution, it cannot not become geopolitical.
And do you think that the arrest was justified?
I'm not a judge. Honestly, I'm not a judge to be, having a say on that matter as of now. There is, however, a question about how do we, as a society, how do we hold those tech owners accountable for what happens on the tools that they provide us with? Because again, if they do not cooperate, if they do not respect the law, which is not an option, right, then they should be held accountable. And if the criminal prosecution is the way to do this, then so be it, because I have another question, which is also quite political and not so often spoken about, which is that he holds a French citizenship, which was granted to him under a very specific scheme, which is the eminent, French people.
Let's talk about that in a moment.
Okay.
But let me first, because I do want to
ahead.
get back to that specific point. It's been a point that's been highlighted again in the last 48 hours. Connor Jewis, do you agree with Reina that let the justice run its course at this particular time, and we'll find out specifically what the beef is?
Of course, agree that justice should run its course, but I think the issue's a little bit more complicated than that. Let's scale it back down to the exact charges in France to start with. I'm not a lawyer, so please do jump in if I'm wrong on this, but for these criminal proceedings to have any merit, they need to have been directly related to crimes that have taken place in France's judiciary, so in France. And he would have to, being him, he would have to have direct knowledge of the things taking place. For these criminal charges to be merited, if that turns out to be true, then absolutely these justice should take its course. But when we go back to the wider question of content moderation, Telegram itself has said that it is within the laws, and as we sort of spoke about earlier, it is under the Digital Services Act. It's not a very large platform because it does come under that 45 million active users in the UK. So it has met all of the laws there. So the question of whether it should do more to moderate content isn't really one for the law if it's within jurisdiction.
Etienne Drouin, do you buy that argument?
Not so much. The question of moderating content on your everyday life as a platform is one question. Cooperating with criminal proceedings in order to provide the identity of a criminal is something else. Doesn't mean that you are not moderating content. It means that you are not providing the identity of a user. And this is the whole question of Telegram. To what extent an encrypted service, which is out of any control of any democracy or even of any authoritarian country, can define the freedom of expression outside of any law, in fact. The first question is, who defines freedom of expression? The answer is not the CEO of a company, but the law. What is the applicable law? When any criminal proceeding is launched in France because of an effect on the French territory, there is a competency. And this is the case here. Third question, is there an issue with the collaboration or cooperation with authorities? It seems that yes, but not only in France, in some other countries. But the fourth question will be, does it affect the political role of this platform being providing an encrypted, secured services which is out of control of any state, including Russia. So is it a fair measure to take, a legitimate measure to take right now because of...
Oh, the image is frozen there with Etienne Droit. We'll try to reconnect. But this sort of harks back to the point, I'll put it to you, Connor Jewis, that Raina was making earlier, just that Telegram, because, for instance, you gave the example of the war in Ukraine, where it is the method of communication for both sides, the boss of that company's got outsized power. To whom is he answerable?
Like one of the technical details before we start with Telegram being referred to as an encrypted chat. There's a bit of a difference there. Only one-to-one messages are encrypted and aren't encrypted by default. A lot of the large-scale chats or group chats or channels, whatever they may be called in the app, aren't actually encrypted end-to-end. So let's get that just on the record there. I think where it gets involved in other places, it really comes down to the question of how you view Telegram, which was briefly mentioned before. Is it a social network or simply a messaging app? Either way, you've sort of got to ask yourself, is the company behind it responsible for actions that are taking place on it? Platforms like this, messaging apps, other social apps, are commonly referred to as the public digital square, the place for discourse to take place. We've got to remember that individuals are, participating in these messages, are providing this content, not the CEO or anyone affiliated with Telegram or another platform.
If I could just pick up on something that Etienne said earlier, I thought it was just important to mention that it's unclear at this stage whether Durov knew he was going to be arrested or whether he was under an arrest warrant or not. We're hearing different things. AFP said that...
The French news agency.
They cited one investigator involved in the case, saying that they were shocked that Durov even decided to come to France, given that he knew he was under an arrest warrant. That's completely the opposite to what the Russian media outlets are saying. They claim that it was just minutes before his plane landed was an arrest warrant actually issued. So that is one big mystery in this whole series of mysteries we've got. And then I thought I'd just mention as well, yes, that is among those charges that have been published by the Paris prosecutors. Number 2, refusal to communicate at the request of competent authorities information or documents necessary for carrying out and operating interceptions allowed by the law. So that's exactly what Etienne is referring to there when he talks about, Durov had a responsibility to know these things were going on. The French authorities will assume that he knew what was going on purely because they had actually requested information about these criminal things that were going on Telegram.
Yeah, so I'd like to get back to this whole qualification. Like, is it an instant messaging platform or is it a social media? And so that's the whole DSA. Is it under DSA or
DSA
not?
is the
Digital
European,
Services Act, yes.
the EU's regulations.
Yeah, so bear with me. It's a little technical. I'll try not to make it too boring or scary. So the DSA says you have enough users in the EU, at least 45 million across the EU. Then you, social network, you should abide by specific obligations because you can't just, come show your face and just do something outside of any scrutiny, right? And so for Telegram and WhatsApp, by the way, it's the same thing. Since they started as instant messaging platforms, but they, especially Telegram, have developed a crazy amount of very interesting social networking features. And especially when I say especially Telegram, there is a very interesting focus towards the user and the usability of the platform by the Telegram, engineering team. So when this question comes through is, are you a technical intermediary, just sending messages from me to you, encrypted or not, that's irrelevant right now, or are you something else? Are you a social network that, and boasting, which is more, at least 45 million users. So Telegram says, it's been very vague about the number of users they have. Sometimes they hid the number they had published. Now they put something else, and so on and so forth. So the question, so they say, okay, since on our, and WhatsApp is the same, only the public-facing channels will be considered as content to define whether we can go under DSA or not. And are there at least 45 million users, active users in the EU, interacting on these channels? So Telegram says we have 41 million altogether, which when you boast nearly 1 billion users worldwide, and you're telling me that public and or not, you only have 41 million active users in the EU, that's kind of weird. That's kind of really. So the European Commission decided that they kind of are not buying it. So they launched an investigation in May of this year, so 2 months ago, to try and count, if you like. To try and really examine how it functions, how many people it actually has for real. And since they are publishing that they do moderation on their dedicated page, how does that happen? Because, moderation, when we are talking about this, we're talking about processes and criteria by which someone, somewhere, decides what content goes and what content stays. And the criteria are dictated by law. You can't just be publishing anything. You can, and that gets you in jail, sort of. So that's the whole discussion and why it's so technical and goes beyond, now the criminal prosecution, because this decides also the fate of other social networks that may be, just as WhatsApp, that may be right below, but that also sets a precedent of sorts towards people who are already subjected to the DSA, but are not really very much looking forward to complying. I'm thinking Elon Musk and his, insulting, if not injurious, comment towards the EU Commissioner Breton earlier, like a few weeks ago, in response to requests to comply with the law.
And it was interesting because the outgoing European Commissioner Breton was chastised a bit by the Commission itself, told to tone it down because he'd been told he had put out a warning to Musk saying that you either put a lid on it a bit, or else. That didn't go down well with the European Commission, saying that, it's not ready. They're still the wait. Let's see what it goes through. Don't proceed with haste. Basically, is what they said to that commissioner.
And just the latest from the Commission, actually. In reaction to the arrest of Durov, they told us this week that they're still considering, for now at least, Telegram as having 42 million active users in the EU. So still not a very large number.
Let's talk about that for a second, because this is a social medium that's gone from strength to strength. The CEO talking up plans for an upcoming flotation on the stock market. Telegram is a little bit different from some of its rivals. Kathy Clifford has more on that.
Telegram was launched in 2013 by Pavel Durov, the 39-year-old billionaire dubbed the Russian Mark Zuckerberg. He left Russia in 2014 after refusing government demands to shut down opposition communities on his former Facebook-like platform VK, inspiring him to launch an encrypted messaging app alongside his brother. Today, Telegram claims almost 1 billion users. The platform allows them to post footage, images and comments on channels. It's built its USP on protecting freedom of expression, user confidentiality, and extremely secure encryption. What's marked it out from rivals like Google or Meta is Telegram's refusal to hand over user data to authorities, except in a few rare cases. This has attracted a wide range of users, from activists in authoritarian states to conspiracy theorists and criminals, as well as governments around the world, which means the platform's encryption system now safeguards the most sensitive geopolitical information. It's particularly influential in Russia, Ukraine and neighbouring states, where some of its news channels are more popular than traditional media. Russia has abandoned efforts to block Telegram, and it is now used by both the government and the opposition. It also plays a key role in Moscow's war against Ukraine, with bloggers from both sides documenting the conflict. The platform has long been criticized for failing to moderate extreme content. French prosecutors accused Durov of not cooperating with authorities, pointing to content involving organized crime, glorification of terrorism, and cyberbullying. Telegram has said it can't be held responsible for what its users do, a defense long used by tech platforms. International experts are watching the investigation closely.
If it's not Telegram, we'll see a shift to other messaging networks. There will always be a clever entrepreneur, an even cleverer malicious user that will find a different mechanism by which to communicate.
Durov set up in Dubai in 2017 at a distance from tougher regulation in the EU and the US. Though Telegram's legal base is in Belgium, it doesn't have enough active EU users to be overseen by EU regulators.
Yeah, we were just talking about there with the Digital Services Act. It's interesting coming up this question of how much you moderate it. There were those riots in the UK earlier this month. I know, Connor Jewis, there were riots where you are in Hartlepool. The Independent quoted one academic who pointed out how the app's moderation team is less than a dozen compared to Facebook's tens of thousands of moderators. Is that a problem?
I think this comes down to a very complex issue when it comes down to content moderation. The content moderation is necessary. That's something you can't get around. And 12 people for a platform that's got 42 million users in the EU alone is not really enough. But when it comes down to the issue of content moderation, things get a little bit more complicated. It's interesting to see what precedents might be set by removing certain types of content that may be disagreeing with others. Content moderation certainly necessary, but where do you draw the line between people are discussing a certain topic or discourse or actually inciting violence, particularly with these riots? Where's the difference between someone discussing what's happened versus encouraging people to go and riot? It's been quite confusing with Twitter, now X, and people being arrested with that here in the UK. There are reports of some people being arrested or charged for simply sharing videos of the riots going on rather than inciting the violence or encouraging people to take part, where there's obviously a clear distinction there, and that seems to be somewhere that content moderation is failing on existing platforms. So I think it's a little bit more complicated than just saying it needs to happen, we need more content moderators.
Right, but there was false information that was disseminated over social media, be it on Twitter or Telegram, talking about Muslims responsible for that stabbing spree that took place in Southport, and nightly rioting that was organized in a lot of these cities, including where you are right now. There should be consequences for those who disseminate false information.
Totally, but those consequences belong at the individuals disseminating this information, not the platform provider. If there was take the riots, for example, taking place outside, should the mayor of Hartlepool be responsible for the actions of these people? No, of course not. So the same should be applied to a digital setting. Of course, these individuals should be prosecuted, but the people behind the way they're communicating should not. I believe that's a pretty slippery slope.
Etienne Trouard is back with us. Etienne, your thoughts on this? Who's responsible when there's hate speech and organizing of these far-right gangs in the UK, for instance?
On a regulatory standpoint, when you raise an illegal content to a platform, depending on the seriousness of the illegal content, you have more or less time to cut the content as a platform. If you don't, you would be responsible for still disseminating illegal content. As an individual, you are also responsible for what you are doing with illegal content, and you could be prosecuted. However, since it would take weeks or months to investigate for a public prosecutor, the first way to act is to ask the platform to be diligent and react quickly when there is any information or alert raised with the platform. So both are responsible. First, to react immediately the platform when it is for serious content or serious infringement, and also the individual. It doesn't mean one should replace the other. but both have responsibilities, including platforms.
Reina Stambulia?
Yeah, so to rephrase and add to what Etienne was just saying, a platform that allows you to reach 50,000 or 200,000 people with your video, it doesn't materialize out of thin air. So you can't just stick it with the good Joe, he shared it and too bad, so he's responsible. No, he is responsible to have started it. But since you allow the means of this to propagate, you cannot be just like hands off, it's not my fault, it's the regular Joe that did it. And the question about moderation has been there ever since the internet started, right? I mean, in the beginning, it was just volunteers. It was us who were kind of trying to, tone down other people talking. But today, it's unimaginable with millions of people, or even more, billions, to just rely on self-regulation of sorts. So that's why when we talk about moderation, we talk about processes and we talk about criteria of what goes and what stays. And that's also why you need humans to look at the video, the whatever it is, because humans don't live in a vacuum, they don't live in a bubble. There are cultural, historical references and subtleties and so on and so forth. If I tell you here, that's a video and that's an image and 70% of it is blood. If it's 70% of it is blood, then remove it. Yeah, but that may be an artistic, depiction of something, and 70% or more is red paint. So that's why you need humans. And I agree that 12 people is, my gosh, that's ridiculous, right? So that's where we also need transparency from people like Durov, but also Elon Musk and others, to know how many moderators there are.
Also, there are almost 1 billion users worldwide.
What languages they speak, how much are they paid? Is there, psychological support for those people? Because, researchers have documented post-traumatic stress disorders for people moderating, terrorist content. When we had Daesh being very active, you had videos of beheadings and, of very gruesome things all day long. So you can't just pay, those little hands and pay them below the minimum wage and just let them do the job or have, 12 people.
The problem is the internet, and we've been talking about it, is transnational. And you could say Pavel Durov is kind of this global citizen, isn't he? He's, Russian, but based in Dubai, legally domiciled. His company is in Brussels. He has now a French passport. He's got a passport from the Caribbean.
Yep. Emirati passport, St. Kitts and Nevis passport, French passport,
So, the question is to what authority do these people answer?
He said that he moved to Dubai and moved his company's operations to Dubai. This was in his interview with Tucker Carlson, one of the few interviews he's given back in April, because there was a lack of interest from the authorities in what Telegram was doing. I think without wanting to get too conceptual here, we can't simply talk about things that happen on the internet as a whole. The way you design your app is really important. And there's a reason why WhatsApp reduced its the number of people you can forward a message to, for instance. Telegram, as we've said, allows these huge channels of...
Hang on, did WhatsApp reduce that because it's afraid of US regulators?
It was told to do so because it was feared to be propagating fake news. I think it was in response to riots in India.
Yeah. Because you don't have the same virality phenomenon, if you like, the way you have it on Twitter, Twitter, for example. You just can send messages, but there is no algorithm, just to simplify it immensely, that will kind of snowball and make something become very visible, right? But the thing is that the more you can send and forward to people, imagine you have a group of 50,000 people and each and every one does that to 3 persons. It snowballs immensely. So that's where this kind of reduction happened to contain spread, given the platform's features.
And for years, Telegram has been accused of being far more virulent when it comes to these large channels of propaganda, of terrorist messaging, of child sexual abuse material, of drug-running gangs. You know, it's faced these accusations for years and years and years, and it is around the fact that it's designed to be as viral as possible.
Connor Jewis, is that something that should be regulated? How viral a platform can be?
That's something that's extremely hard to answer. I mean, this content moderation debate is also extremely hard to answer because different places have different laws. Like over in the US, platforms aren't required to remove content unless it's directly incites violence or involves illegal activities. So hate speech isn't always necessarily going to have to be removed. So, considering these requirements specifically around forwarding, I think it's important to draw the line between where can a feature be misused versus where is this feature adding benefits to users. I don't think that's something that could be settled in a debate.
Is there a difference? Is there a difference, Connor, between Telegram and, you know, we've just referenced WhatsApp, we've referenced Twitter. What's the specificity of Telegram?
It's more, I would argue, it's still a messaging app at heart. If you ask yourself a basic question, what do people do on Telegram? It's send messages. But it does have a few more social features than WhatsApp or other alternatives built in. There's the announcement, there are channels where you can set up like almost really large-scale groups akin to messaging boards almost. And there are more social features when it comes to reacting, liking content, and that sort of thing. And of course, the forwarding rules are different.
Etienne Drouard, we've heard one argument that's been put forth by defenders of Pavel Durov saying, look, you've got a war in Ukraine and both sides are using it. That proves that it's an impartial platform.
No, it doesn't prove anything because Durov doesn't choose what his users are talking about. They may sell weapons, they may save democracy, they may defend Ukrainians, they may do whatever they want. The two specificities of Telegram are first, technical robustness of encryption, which is out of control of any state. Second, headquartered in Dubai, which is not for climate, but for the kind of neutrality between China, Europe, and the USA. And third, the core existing reason of Telegram is to provide trust that any communication shared between users may be out of control of any state. This is why it is a location for criminals. This is also why it is a location for people nourishing freedom of expression. Both are on Telegram. So Durov did not choose that, but benefits from the technical specificities of his service. And this is why each state over this planet would like to regulate this service. But here, to come back to the arrest of Mr. Durov, we're not dealing with regulatory enforcement. We are dealing with criminal enforcement based on rules that were adopted in 1996, not under the DSA. So the interesting debate about regulation from Europe or from any other region is out of the scope of the current situation of Mr. Durov, even if it is very interesting for social media regulation. But here he has to answer as an intermediary to a criminal judge for criminal prosecution.
And Etienne, if he's felt a bit of hubris flying in on his private jet to Paris for a Saturday night dinner, it's also because, and Reina was talking about earlier, he's a French national. In 2021, Durov followed in the footsteps of Snap Supremo, obtaining French citizenship. The question is why. Le Monde's Damien Leloup listed the ways and found that there's only one procedure by which Durov could have been naturalized, that of so-called foreigner emeritus. Do we know why he wanted to be French and why he was fast-tracked this citizenship?
He wanted to find a neutral way of living his life in peace, still having his company headquartered in Dubai, but however, being far away from the USA, far away from Russia. So it was quite a It's not Switzerland. It was interesting for him to be part of the European Union because it may be a place of balance where you don't have any huge headquartered service providers as platforms. So it was quite a fair and smart move, I would say. You can choose where you headquarter your company. You could also almost, when you are in his position, choose which citizen you are a part of, which is citizenship. And a point on the Russian attitude, full of cynicism, maybe. He was a Russian citizen, but I would not give credit to the freedom of speech in Russia, and also to the idea that he could be protected by Russian law because he is protected by the fact that he is outside of Russia. And it is the history of this company and of this young man.
So that's why he wanted perhaps to be a French citizen. But why was he granted that citizenship?
Well, that's the $1 billion or euros question, right? I mean, he doesn't even speak French. I mean, the advantage is for him becoming a French
certificate. He had to supply a B1 certificate in French. We know that he's got that because that's been reported, but that's not a high level of French.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, mine is way better. But yeah, so that's the kind of situations, you know, that we don't know. And it's a very uncomfortable question to be asked. You know, why did he get that citizenship? I mean, at least the Snap's CEO speaks French. So I don't know. Seriously, I don't know. What I know, however, is that even if this is, again, just a criminal prosecution now, just quote unquote, again, it is blowing off limits about so many things. And we will continue having that discussion, you know, about also, are other social media CEOs liable when, look at Snapchat, we just talked about it. There is so much drug and you know, spam and scammy schemes on Snapchat. So, okay, they're subject to DSA, but again, criminal prosecution aside, shouldn't we do the same thing with the CEO, you know, the Snapchat CEO? Because we could.
Peter O'Brien, we're almost out of time, but
I just wanted to
could this be a turning point, this arrest?
I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on whether there'll be other arrests, but I just wanted to also add Durov's own words on his own French nationality. A year after he received it, he posted a message on Telegram, which, I mean, can only be described as flippant. He describes it as sort of filling in a form almost as a joke to sort of Frenchify his name, and that's how he got French citizenship. And honestly, I'm not sure it will make a lot of French people enamored with him, particularly those who have had to fight tooth and nail to get their own citizenship.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we'll leave it there. So much more to talk about as this case unfolds. And as we find out what the specific charges are, Peter O'Brien, Reina Stambulia, I want to thank as well Etienne Droual for joining us from Avignon, Connor Jewis in Hartlepool, England. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.